So KALIEF served a sentence. Not even a sentence. I can't even say a sentence. He served 3 years at Rikers Island jail. And 2 of those 3 years, KALIEF BROWDER was in solitary confinement. Now, if you are or have ever been an inmate awaiting trial, you could have been innocent, as KALIEF was. But if you've ever been to jail, not even Rikers Island, but if you've ever been to jail and you've been in solitary confinement, can you imagine spending 2 entire years in solitary confinement? That's what this 16-year-old boy was forced to do on May 10th of 2015. So let's talk about it. So KALIEF BROWDER was born on May 25th in the year of 1993. So not only does that make us born the same year, but he was born on May 25th. That makes him a Gemini. Who doesn't love a fucking Gemini? Anyways, that's probably why his story touches my heart in the deepest ways possible. Not only does mostly only Geminis understand other Geminis, but this story touched my entire soul, and I'm pretty sure you won't be able to listen to this story if you never heard it without crying. This is a terrible, terrible situation, and my heart and my prayers and my whole entire soul goes out to the Browder family, seriously. Unfortunately, Vanita Browder, who was his foster. Okay, so KALIEF was born in the Bronx, New York, and that is where he was also raised. He was born to his birth mother and his birth father, of course, and the internet unfortunately doesn't give us much information about his birth mother and his birth father, which means they weren't that important. Now, I'm not here to judge anybody, as I have been through, situations myself, but Miss Vanita Browder and Everett Browder, which is her husband, they raised KALIEF Browder. When KALIEF was 10 years old, Everett Browder left the family and he was left with his foster mother, Vanita Browder, who seems to be this phenomenal woman. And if she was alive today, I promise you, I would book a flight and go to wherever she is, just to embrace her, just to hug her, and just to love her, because you don't get women like her. So who is KALIEF Browder? Let's talk about it, because not a lot of people have heard about his situation, and it kind of baffles me, and I'm kind of appalled, because as a black female, I am always tuned in to Black history and things that happen in the Black community that should not have ever happened in the Black community, things that happen. Okay, so like I said, KALIEF Browder was born into the system. He was taken away from his birth mother and given to Vanita and Everett. Although Everett left, Vanita was this astonishing mom. And that poem by Maya Angelou? I'm actually going to write that on something and give it to my grandmother for Mother's Day, because she just reminds me of this phenomenal woman. And it's so crazy because I'm a 90s baby, and Maya Angelou, she's very, very much older, and that poem it does something to me, and every time I hear it, I think about my grandmother. Now, when I hear it, I think about Vanita Browder. She's just this phenomenal woman, and she took in all these children. She was just if I can meet her. Oh, that's all I could say is just if I can meet her. Unfortunately, I cannot. Okay, so like I said, he was raised by Vanita Browder. Everybody described KALIEF as, he just got along. He was one of those kids, in every high school, where he just got along with everybody. Now, KALIEF has never had a very bad criminal record before this. And this is important. This is really important to remember, that he does not have a record. He was never convicted of a crime before May 10th of 2015, when his life changed. Okay, and let's rewind. I think this is very also important to remember about, Miss Venita Browder. She raised over 30 foster children in the state of New York. KALIEF was one of her newest foster kids, and it was reported that she showed an enormous amount of love and attention to KALIEF. Not that she did not love her siblings, because, his siblings, because like I said, she raised over 30 foster children, and this is including her own. This woman is superwoman to the state of New York. If only she was in the state of North Carolina, where I am from. I know so much people that would just adore this woman just because of who she is. She was an angel sent from heaven. Okay, so we won't talk about KALIEF's birth mother too much. Well, I won't, at least, because I do not ever want to be the one to give false information. I know how much and how important a relationship is with a mother and her son, and we don't know the circumstances with his real birth mother, whether it was great, whether it was bad. That's not important in this case. So let's talk about the dreadful day of May 15th of 2010. This was the day that changed KALIEF Browder's life forever, for the rest of his life. So on May 15th of 2010, KALIEF and a friend were walking home from a house party that they had went to. KALIEF is 16 years old at the time. I remember going to parties when I was 16 years old. We never had to walk home, but I'm in North Carolina. He is in New York. Apparently walking is, a big part of a New Yorker's day and night. So KALIEF and his friend were walking home. They were going home. It was around 2-something in the morning. They were going home from a house party when they were stopped by NYPD in the Bronx of New York, and they were stopped because of this. So they were stopped because a Hispanic guy, and this Hispanic guy's name was Roberto Barista. I'm not sure how to say his last name, and I don't want to mess it up. So they were stopped because this Roberto person apparently was in the back of one of the police cars and told officers, hey, it was that guy. He was apparently in the back of a police car and told officers it was that guy who stole my book bag. He stole $700, a camera, and an iPod or an something from his backpack. And this guy identified KALIEF as the thief. So officers did what they were supposed to do during this time, and they stopped Browder and his friend and said, you know what, we just got a tip or whatever. So first and foremost, KALIEF and him or his friend, they never saw this Roberto character in either of the police cars. So they don't know if he was in the police car or not. So initially, I'm sorry, y'all, someone here. So initially, they told Browder that you were identified as a suspect, so we need to check your book bag. KALIEF is 16. He is in the Bronx, New York. Everybody knows that during this time of 2010, all of the new guys and all of the younger guys were walking around swagged out with book bags on their back. Apparently, Roberto, whoever this may be, which I still feel like is a made-up character, but we'll get into that later, lost a book bag. So when KALIEF and his friend were first stopped, KALIEF told officers, he's like, yo, I didn't rob nobody. I don't know what the y'all are talking about, but y'all can check my bag. Y'all can check my pockets. Y'all can check whatever. Of course, the officer stopped this 16-year-old who was a minor at this time. They were not supposed to do anything without this man's parents. He is a minor, 16 years old. I didn't do anything. Y'all could check my bag. Y'all could check whatever. The police checked him and they found nothing. Let me repeat that in case you have not heard me. They found nothing. The KALIEF BROWDER story was supposed to end right here. They were supposed to send those children on their way and they go find who really stole Roberto's bag. They did not. Okay, so this Roberto character, let's get into him. They don't have much information about him on the internet, of course. So anyways, he was sitting in the back of a police car. This was never confirmed by no one. I can't find this nowhere on the internet. This guy could have not been in a police car at all. They could have just... Anyways, we'll talk about that later. When we get into conspiracy theories about the KALIEF BROWDER story. Anyways, so his story changed over 3 times. At first, it happened that night. Then it was his brother's book bag. Then he said, okay, well, they tried to rob me, but they didn't. Still, officers stopped, detained, and arrested this man for stealing a book bag from a character who couldn't even get his story straight. Regardless of whether this happened that night that KALIEF was arrested, 2 weeks prior, like one of his stories were, or a week prior, regardless of when it happened, you mean to tell me you are in the state of New York and you're worried about a book bag? Out of all the crime that happens in the city of New York, especially the Bronx, you're worried about a book bag. From a 16-year-old whom you have no proof. You have no proof besides what someone said, and he can't even get his story correct. You think, and you're going to detain and arrest this minor without his... He was arrested and he was booked with the promise of him going home. Of course, that was not true. His bond was set at $10,000, and I think with a bondsman he needed about $3,000 to get out. His family were, like I said, it was just his foster mom, and she had a lot of children, so she could not post bail at this time. So KALIEF BROWDER, 16 years old, was sent to a jail where they hold, people who can't post bond. They are notorious for holding people who can't post bond. And this jail is called Rikers Island. This is where shit gets... So if you haven't heard about Rikers Island is one of the worst, the absolute worst jails you can ever be sent to in the entire United States of America. Not only are they known for, fights and gang-related activities, but they are also known for their correctional officers starving and abusing the inmates. So this is a petty theft and a crime this little boy never committed, and he was sent to one of the worst jails in the United States of America. A 16-year-old child. He was a child. This is so important that I had to read it from the paper because I didn't want to make no mistakes. Rikers Island, where did I start at? Had a deep-seated culture of violence in which inmates suffered broken jaws, broken or habitual bones, broken noses, long bone fractures, and lacerations requiring stitches. So at first, Rikers Island was terrible. At first, it was terrible. KALIEF was reporting to his mother how he had to wash his clothes in a metal bucket and with just water, which would cause rust stains on his clothes. So he was washing to put on dirty clothes. He was washing dirty clothes only to make them rusty. And KALIEF also reported how he had to sleep on top of his belongings so that they would not get stolen. This is a 16-year-old boy in a jail with older prisoners and murderers and child molesters, and this is a child having to defend his life against these people. He was, like I said, sleeping on top of his clothes. He also had to sleep on top of the bucket that he washed his clothes in so he would be able to wash his clothes. For KALIEF started to get worse. KALIEF is a 16-year-old black male in a prison where if you have a 16-year-old, if you even know a 16-year-old, you know how rebellious a 16-year-old could be. KALIEF is in jail for a crime he did not commit. He thinks that any day now they're going to be like, you know, Mr. Browder, pack your shit, you're going home. You didn't do this. Unfortunately, that's just not how it worked for this 16-year-old child. He got into fights with the guards. He got into fights with other cellmates. He got into fights with other prisoners. KALIEF Browder was put in solitary confinement for 2 of KALIEF Browder was put into solitary confinement for 2 of the 3 years that he spent at Rikers Island at only 16 years old. Now, let's talk about what solitary confinement actually is, because you can say, okay, well, he got into fights. They just put him on lockdown. Lockdown and solitary confinement are 2 totally different things, and solitary confinement should have never been an option for this 16-year-old child. Solitary confinement is where an inmate is, they live in a small cell for 23 hours of a 24-hour day. These inmates, regardless of the small petty crime, like being accused of stealing a book bag that this man never stole, he spent 2 years out of 3. 1 year is what, 365 days? Child spent 2 years only being allowed to come out of his cell 1 hour per day. Browder was verbally and physically abused by not only other inmates but also other correctional officers. It was reported that the correctional that's my cat and my dog. I promise you, my cat is not getting slaughtered. That is how they play. I have learned to ignore them. You should guys just do the same. So anyways, Browder has reported to his brother and also his mother, Vanita Browder, that correctional officers had did more damage to him than an inmate ever could. He was mentally, physically, emotionally abused, mostly by correctional officers that worked at Rikers Island. KALIEF has talked about multiple times where he was being starved, all because the correctional officers, I feel like, in my opinion, correctional officers, they take these classes and they say they're so certified, but really they're paid babysitters. All they are trained to do is go and babysit these inmates. And if you make their babysitting job hard, they can make you pay and they can get away with it. So KALIEF, he's 16 years old. He is rebellious. They are starving him. They are letting other inmates beat on him. They are beating on him. Who wouldn't? talk back, who wouldn't fight back. You know what I'm saying? KALIEF fought back, and KALIEF had a mouth on him to be 16, and I do not blame him whatsoever. He talked. This 16-year-old child is at an adult jail, I call it prison, where he's being starved. He's being abused by inmates. He's being abused by correctional officers, and he's 16. He's 16. It doesn't matter what he's calling and telling his mother. She can't do anything for him because she couldn't post his bail. So can you just imagine? This makes me so fucking emotional. My son is 12 years old, and he's almost at that age where if my son was in this situation, I wouldn't be like Benita Browder. She was very calm, and I applaud her for that. Now, mind you, KALIEF, let me remind you that KALIEF Browder is in solitary confinement 2 out of the 3 years that he is incarcerated. So when you're in solitary confinement, you're not able to make phone calls. They don't let you. So his mom, his brother, and his family, they don't know what's going on with KALIEF. They know nothing but what his court-appointed, and I say court-appointed with emphasis, because everybody knows court-appointed attorneys are attorneys that work for the fucking DA. Everybody knows that. They're not. Anyways, they have no clue what's going on with KALIEF because he's in solitary confinement. He can't call them and tell them. Solitary confinement, they don't give you those privileges. And at Rikers Island, so let's fast forward. On March 13th of 2013, 3 years after this man had been sitting in fucking prison for a crime he never committed, he was offered immediate release if he pled guilty to stealing the book bag and everything that this Roberto person claims was in it. KALIEF Browder refused and was sent back to Rikers Island jail. So I just want to take the time to say that really says a lot about KALIEF's character. He knew that he did not steal this book bag, and KALIEF absolutely refused. Regardless, let's think about everything that I talked about that he went through at Rikers Island. He still refused to go home that day. All he had to do was say that he did it. KALIEF was so proud, and he was so fucking black. He was so black that he decided to fight literally for his freedom. So what I wasn't going to talk about, but I decided to edit and put it in this video anyway, is that KALIEF attempted suicide in 2010, and he also attempted suicide in 3 years later in February. While at Rikers Island, KALIEF sought mental help. He was in solitary confinement in a little cell by himself, starved and abused for years, days, months, weeks, without talking, without eating. This is enough alone to do anything to the mental health. What they forgot at Rikers Island was that these are humans. I don't care what crime they committed. In KALIEF's case, he never committed a crime. Suicide. He said that the officers, they told him to do this. This is what he said. This was his words, and I believe 100%. I believe this 100%, and you'll see when I start talking about what happened after KALIEF really did, unfortunately, commit suicide in real life. He said that they told him to do it, and he tried to commit suicide by hanging himself in the jail cell. The guards knew that they were on camera. So once he did, they watched him for a little while and they waited on him to die. Knowing that they were on camera, they went into his room, threw him from the streets, and so I wanted to read this straight from this paper so that I would not mess up his words. This is KALIEF's words. People tell me because I have this case against the city, I'm all right. But I'm not all right. I'm messed up. I know that I might see some money from this case, but that's not going to help me mentally. I'm mentally scarred right now. That's how I feel. There are certain things that changed about me, and they may not change back. Those are the exact words of KALIEF BROWDER. So let's get into the aftermath. The last part of this video I want to talk about is after KALIEF was released. And guess why he was released? He was released because Roberto, who is the accuser in this situation, moved back to Mexico. He stopped cooperating with police. He didn't want to talk anymore. He didn't have any more information. And he was a liar in the whole case. So, KALIEF's case, after 3 years at Rikers Island, the worst jail ever, and 2 years in solitary confinement, KALIEF's case was dismissed. That's right. It was dismissed. You would think, happily ever after, this man beat this case. Wow, after 3 years, he got out. Wonder what he did. Well, unfortunately, after KALIEF got out, this situation actually turned worse than what it had ever been before. Vanita Browder was his mother, and they were all excited when KALIEF came home. I mean, their brother's home after 3 years of sitting in a jail and 2 years of solitary confinement for a crime that he never committed. He was 16 when he was arrested, so he's about 18 now. He's still got his life. You would think everything is fine and dandy. Unfortunately, it was not, and his life turned upside down. When KALIEF Browder got out, his mother and his brothers and sisters, they all agreed that KALIEF was not the same when he got out. He was consistently paranoid, and I say paranoid with quotes because I personally do not believe KALIEF was paranoid, as they called it. Unfortunately, when he got out, he was I'm sorry, this part makes me so sad. This part really makes me sad to even talk about. It's hard to talk about. I have no clue who this kid is. I've never seen him before, but this part brings me to tears. So when KALIEF was released, he was never the same. Basically, he was institutionalized. His mother reported some days he would walk around the perimeter of the driveway, and she would ask him why he was doing that, and he would always just say, "Mom, this is all I was ever able to do in solitary confinement." Understandable. And his mother also reported that some days she just didn't know what to do with KALIEF. She didn't understand his mental health, which is understandable. She cannot be blamed. She cannot be... I promise y'all, my cat is not getting slaughtered. She just... My dog is so rough with her. And it's just like... I don't get it. Anyways, like I said, she did not know what to do. So there were days that Miss Vanita talks about, and also KALIEF's handsome brother would talk about, that KALIEF would constantly come into their rooms and ask them if they're okay. And KALIEF also reported that he was stalked. He was being stalked by these correctional officers that told him on multiple occasions when he was released they would get him. get him. And I quote, so when KALIEF was released, get off my bag. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, don't want YouTube to ban me for animal cruelty or anything. But, so anyways, KALIEF was told that they would get him. They literally told him that. So after his release, he went back to living a normal life until one day he was shot in the abdomen. Now, this is where the story gets, there's another twist. Okay, so KALIEF was shot in the abdomen and he was taken to the hospital. When he was taken to the hospital, they restrained him in handcuffs in ICU. This child has just spent 3 years at Rikers Island, abused. He has nose fractures. He has all kinds of mental illness. And then he was shot by someone he don't even know. This KALIEF reported that he was shot by a white man, but this wasn't until later. So he's in ICU, shot, fighting for his life, right? They restrain him in fucking handcuffs. They put, so KALIEF brother talks about when KALIEF got shot, he went straight to the hospital. They said he said he was calling his name, and he ran to the room where he heard his name being called from, which is the room KALIEF was in. He said KALIEF saw him but was still calling his name. Now, this is an immediate reaction to the drug that KALIEF was on. Now, they named him as a John Doe when he first got shot because KALIEF was not able mentally to tell them his name. When they're named you as a John Doe, that means they don't know who you are. KALIEF was on medication at the time, so he was cross-medicated. Although he was born into the system, which means they should know exactly who he is and exactly where he came. Not only was he born into the system, so they should know his name off automatically, but KALIEF was kind of infamous in New York. Infamous, as we say here. But he was kind of like a big deal. He had done shows. He was on The View. He had interviews. He was famous on YouTube for his situation at Rikers Island. They knew who KALIEF was. They were cross-medicating him. KALIEF was a target. He knew and saw too much. They never expected him to be that case. He was released, and he was released knowing what he knew and seeing what he saw and going through what he went through. KALIEF was wrongfully convicted. The state of New York at this point, and this is just my opinion, they felt like at this point they had to get rid of him. He knew too much. Obama was mentioning him. He was being mentioned by a lot of famous people. And like I said, he knew too much. KALIEF was a target. They had to get rid of him, but he was free. So initially, when KALIEF got shot, they eventually ruled that as self-inflicted. They said that KALIEF shot himself. KALIEF reported being shot by a white man upon telling his mother that there were unmarked police cars watching him when he would go outside sometimes. Now, this is a true event that happened before he got shot. KALIEF would go outside and he would see these cars, right? And they would hold out guns, or they would hold out their hands as if they were holding guns, the infamous whatever. Anyways, they would speed by and basically chase him back in the house. He would go in the house, tell his mother there were unmarked cars outside. His mother would go outside, and of course by this time they were gone. She thought that her son was going mad. She thought her son was really going crazy, so she really wanted her son to be in some kind of psychiatric help. Y'all see what they just did to my curtain? This is terrible. Z. So she sought help for her son. You know, she really thought maybe he was paranoid, and in multiple interviews you'll see Miss Vanita Browder stating, my son became extremely paranoid. But then you'll also see his brother saying, no, he wasn't paranoid. He knew exactly what was happening. He saw these people and they were fucking with him. They drove him to his insanity, which led to his suicide. They made him kill himself. They drove this child, this, I want to say 16, because he was 16 when all this happened. And I really believe that KALIEF stayed 16. So eventually people started saying that the medication that he was on, you know, he had some kind of mixed reaction, and that's what led him to suicide. Because everybody knows that any antidepressants, I have PTSD, I have depression, I suffer from the bipolar disorder, and every medicine I take, the side effect is always suicide. So they tried to say that that is what led to his ultimate suicide, when he hung himself from his window by some sheets and an air conditioner, ultimately ending his life on June 6th, 2 days before my birthday. KALIEF Browder's death was real suicide, which unfortunately it was, and no one was ever charged in his death, because ultimately he did kill himself. Now, what I believe happened is that when he was released, all of those, like I said, I feel like KALIEF, they wanted, and when I say they, if you know, you know, they wanted KALIEF dead. They could not, because the case was too weak. They couldn't hold him, and they thought that they would lead him to a suicide while he was in Rikers Island. Fortunately, he was released, and unfortunately, he did commit suicide after he was released. But they drove him to that. They said he was paranoid. No one was ever watching him. They said that he shot himself when he was shot in ICU. They said that was self-inflicted, which was proven that it was no way possible that could have been self-inflicted. They said it was self-inflicted. He spent time in a mental institution. He was released. Then he killed himself because he was being watched. He was being chased. He was getting these strange phone calls saying that they were going to get him. The last phone call he got, and I can't remember if it was a phone call or a text message, but they said, "We warned you." That day is the day KALIEF hanged himself and killed himself. He was afraid. He was not running from nothing. KALIEF did not shoot himself. KALIEF was scared to death. Usually people use that as an expression, but in this case, he was scared to death. My heart goes out to the Browder family. Vanita Browder, may you forever rest in peace. You were an angel sent to this earth. KALIEF, thank you. You ended solitary confinement to minors. You got the attention of President Barack Obama. You made a difference. Your name will forever live on. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And this is coming from the mother of 3 black males. That's it for me today, guys. Please join me when I talk about my next case. And how I'm going to say is KJ. another very sad case. Let's talk about it.